Tanya Pearson interviewing Eva Gardner on January 13th, 2018 in Los Angeles for the Women of Rock Oral History Project. Thank you so much for participating.
Thanks for having me.
Bandmate. So these interviews, we start at the very beginning.
Okay.
So if you could talk a bit about where you grew up in your family of origin.
Well, I grew up, where I grew up. Oh, that's where?
Yeah. Around Los Angeles?
I grew up in Los Angeles, born and raised in LA, and have stayed here. I still live here, and I travel a lot for various things, but I always call LA home, and I'm happy here.
Your dad was a musician.
Mm-hmm. Dad was a bass player as well, and my story pretty much starts with him.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
What did your mom do?
My mom was in fashion. She is from New Orleans and had a vintage clothing store in the early 70s, and vintage clothing back then was like 20s, 30s, 40s. So she kind of was a real trailblazer in that way, and a very forward thinker. And then, I met my dad in New Orleans, actually, because my dad was recording a record there. Met in a bar on Bourbon Street. And, then they moved to LA a little bit later, and then I came 4 years later.
Do you have any siblings?
I have 2 siblings. I have 2 younger sisters, and they are twins. We're about 3.5 years apart.
And what was your relationship with your parents growing up? Like, did you all get along? It sounds like, was it a creative household? Was creativity encouraged?
Yeah, we were and are a very close-knit family. I'm one of the few kids that had parents that were still together growing up. And my dad remained a musician, but he also opened a British pub in Hollywood called the Cat and Fiddle. So he opened that in 1982, originally in Laurel Canyon, and my sisters and I pretty much grew up in a British pub. So there was a lot of rock and roll coming through there, a lot of music coming through there. It was a hub for the music industry. It moved to Sunset Boulevard in 1985, and we most recently moved to a new location on Highlands and Melrose. And it still remains after 35 years. It was a real hub for the entertainment industry. And so my family spent a lot of time there. My sisters and I grew up there. And between that and all the parties and the friends coming through my house as a young child, I was around music quite a bit.
And I think you said a minute ago that your dad was the one that got you into music or playing music?
Yeah, so he was a bass player, and I grew up hearing his stories about being on the road and all the adventures that comes with being on tour, and especially in his day in the 1960s. He was from London, so he was part of the British invasion. So there was a lot of music coming up at that time that was just so groundbreaking, and he was part of that movement. I mean, he jammed with Jimi Hendrix. He was good friends with Jimmy's drummer Mitch Mitchell. He was in the British Birds, the Birds with Ron Wood. They lived in the same neighborhood. He knew all the guys from The Who. I mean, the names just go on and on and on, but he was part of that scene. It was like the swinging 60s in London. So it was just such a crucial time in music. And hearing about that and growing up with him, I just really I felt like that was my destiny as well. And so I followed suit, and he was my dad, and he was my mentor and my hero. And I just knew from an early age that I wanted to do the same thing that he did.
Did you start with bass? Was that your first instrument?
I did. I started with bass. Actually, that's not true. I took some piano lessons when I was in elementary school, but I never really took to it that much. And I remember making a decision when I was a young kid, probably about 7, that I wanted to play bass. And I didn't even really know what that meant, but I just had it in my head that I was going to be a bass player. So the piano lessons kind of, I totally chickened out of my piano recital. It was so weird. I was so afraid to play in front of people, and it just really freaked me out, and I chickened out. And it's funny to think now that I was afraid to perform in front of people with the piano, but when I started playing bass, I was excited about it, and I think it just felt natural to me, and I just took to bass like a fish in water. It kind of found me. It chose me, I guess.
And did your dad give you lessons, or did you take lessons with someone else?
Well, he wasn't really that into the idea of me playing bass when I first like would bring it up, which is kind of funny. And I don't really know why that is exactly. That might be for a few reasons. So it was actually one of his best friends that gave me my first bass lesson and encouraged me to start playing. And once that happened, Dad was like, okay, there's no turning back. She's into it. It's going to happen. So he eventually took me under his wing and showed me how to change the strings and how to set it up. And we had some really wonderful, very precious bonding time. And he taught me as much as he could, really. And it got to a point where I wanted to take it a step further and go to school and like learn the technical things. And my dad never learned really how to read music. He dropped out of school at 15 and started touring. But back in the 60s, that was like a possibility and a reality for all these guys. And when I started doing it, my dream of dropping out of school at 15 and doing the same thing really wasn't that practical. Being a different time and all that stuff. So it got to a point when I wanted to take music further, I had to get a teacher, and I went to music school and just went the next step. But he was part of the foundational, fundamental stuff for sure. Plus having that bond with my dad anyway was cool.
And who were some of your early musical influences?
I remember, gosh, I feel like when I started playing music, I was really into like the grunge stuff. It was whatever was on K-Rock at the time in the early 90s. Those were the bass lines that I was learning, like the, Nirvana, Pearl Jam, Stone Temple Pilots, stuff like that, along with stuff from my dad's generation, the Jimi Hendrix, the Led Zeppelin, Cream, Rolling Stones, Beatles, stuff like that. So it was a mix of stuff, but.
And what kind of, so like pre-high school, so you said that you were shy kind of growing up and couldn't do the piano side. What kind of student were you? Like how did you fit in with your peer group, pre-high school, like little Eva Gardner?
Little Eva was a little bit of a weirdo, I think. Like I didn't really fit into any peer group. I liked a lot of different things. While not fitting into any peer group, I feel like and this going into high school, like I also could relate to a lot of them. I was like friends with like the raver kids. I was friends with the punk rockers. I'd hang out with the squatters outside of punk shows in Hollywood and Vine. And I kind of, I don't know, like even the way I dressed, one day I dressed like a hippie with bell bottoms and, big flowy shirts. And the next I would be like tight pants and like leather jacket. So I was just I was kind of all over the place, but I was also very shy in a weird way. And, but I was also a good student. Like I really wanted to do well. So there were a lot of things happening there. And I think that music was a way to help me work through my shyness and develop who I was as a person as I was growing into a young person, a young girl, into a young adult.
Did you play in bands like as a teenager, or did you play with other people?
My first band was, I was going to an all-girl Catholic school in Los Feliz called Immaculate Heart for a couple years, and actually not too far away from where we are right now. And I started playing in a band there. And naturally, it was an all-girl band because it was girls from the school. So that was my first band that I was in. And we did, that's when I really started writing original music and exploring my creative side. And I just absolutely loved it. And so we played shows. I had my first show here and just started playing shows like the Whiskey and just clubs around LA, just being an LA kid and playing at the places that we would go see bands at. And then as I finished up my first 2 years of high school, I decided to take music a little bit more seriously, went to an arts high school for my last 2. And that's really when I really ramped up as far as like playing in more bands, learning more about music, just taking it a little bit more seriously.
Once you went to the
arts high school,
you were also playing in bands?
Yes.
Yeah.
Like even more so, because it was like I was fully immersed in music at that point, because it was an arts high school. The curriculum was like the regular high school stuff during the math, the science, the English first part of the day, and then the second part of the day, you're fully immersed in whatever department you're in. There was art, theater, music, and visual art.
And at that point, what were your kind of expectations for yourself or for your future? Had you decided that you were going to make music a career?
All I ever wanted to do was tour. That was like my goal. And so that was always my end goal. But I realized at a certain point that I can't just drop out of school and go on tour. Like I decided that I wanted to finish school. There was a certain trajectory I wanted to follow. Like, okay, if I'm going to take this seriously, I should probably go further into my schooling and my education and just get as much out of that and as much knowledge as I can. It's kind of like the idea of I felt like I had to learn the rules before I could break them. And that lesson became very clear to me when I actually auditioned for that arts high school, and I didn't get in the first time. And I went into that school thinking that like, oh, my dad didn't learn how to read music. Like, why should I? And my audition piece was just some crazy abstract, weird piece. And then when one of the teachers asked me if I was learning how to read music, and I was like, nah. And just I was giving him those answers, and I had that attitude, thinking like I didn't need to get the education. Like I could just like fly by the seat of my pants and play by ear like I had been, like my dad did, like that whole generation did, like a lot of bands did. But then I didn't get in. And so at that point I was like, oh, light bulb goes off. Okay, if I want to do this, I gotta figure this out. So it was at that point that I got a teacher. I started learning, like the audition, I auditioned a second time because I was like, screw that, I'm not gonna take no for an answer. This is what I wanna do. So I was like, what do I have to do to figure this out? So I got the teacher, and for my next audition, I like played a Bach piece. And then I was like, hey, check out my wide range of skills. Now I'm gonna play a boogie woogie piece. So I was like, basically telling them what they wanted to hear and showing them what they wanted to see. That second time when I auditioned, when he was asking me if I was learning how to read music, that time I said yes. He put up like some music staff on the board, and he put up some notes, and he asked me what they were, and I told him what they were. And at that point, that's when I got in, because I was learning the rules and wanted to learn the rules and really wanted to be there. So that's the thing about that school, is you have to want to be there.
Yeah. And the bands that you were playing in at the time, because I was thinking about like your influences, so 90s, the kind of grunge thing. And well, I don't want to make a blanket statement, but this came up the other night. So musicianship isn't a huge part of like punk and grunge and all that stuff. Did you feel kind of like out of place, or your skill level was maybe like above and beyond people that you were playing with, or did you not think about it when you were playing in bands with people of like different skill levels, I guess? Well,
that's the thing, is that I totally get that, yeah, musicianship isn't always necessary, or like not necessary, but like that's not always a focus. Like, sure, like so many people are in hugely successful bands and don't learn like the technical language of it. But I felt for what I wanted to do, I needed to learn that language. But I also, right out of college, because I went to college afterwards, right after college, after I had learned all these rules, I was playing in a band where none of the guys knew any of the language. But that was also refreshing for me, because I felt like at school, I started learning boxes. So I felt like that whole creative spark that I had before was dimmed a little bit, because I was so used to being in a scholastic setting where it's like, you're in boxes basically. And so coming out of that and being in a band where there weren't any rules anymore was so liberating and fantastic. And like the parts these people were coming up with, they're not thinking about rules. They're not thinking about that. They're just like receiving from the ether, and it's just coming out. And that is just so liberating and freeing as well. So that was an amazing experience for me. On the flip side of that, if I get a call for a session last minute and they say, hey, can you come down and do a session? They send me music, they send me a chart to read, I can say, sure, no problem. So I'm able to at least do that as well. Like I'm there's flexibility, there's options there for me. So for me personally, wanting to be a musician that can go on the road and be available to be a hired gun or work for hire and stuff like that, it's helpful to have that side of it as well. Yeah. But there's beauty in both things, I think.
I think so too.
Yeah.
I told Sophie and Michael when Alice asked me when we played, it's like, I'm not playing with Eva Gardner. She's like a professional musician. I don't even know what this is. Like I hear it and I can like play stuff, but I don't know what they're called.
And that's okay.
How nice you were. Yeah. Whenever I hear that someone is a trained or like a professional musician, I'm just like, no way. Or I think, you know, like, oh, what if do they like look down on people who aren't also trained? And it felt great. You were so nice. I didn't feel stupid at all. So thanks.
but I mean, there's plenty of people who I wouldn't say like that aren't professional, because there's plenty of people that don't know how to read music that are way beyond professional. But there's also lots of brilliantly trained musicians that don't ever get as far as a piano bar or something like that for whatever reason. It just kind of depends, I think.
Okay, and can you talk a little bit about your college career and experience at UCLA?
Yeah, so I decided that after high school, which was more of a strict conservatorial kind of a thing. It's like you're either in the jazz program or you're in the classical program there. And it's the idea of, it's a very Western idea in that music is seen as a business. If you don't practice 10 hours a day, you'll never make money. Music is, the word business comes into play a lot. So when I decided to go to college, I wasn't even going to go, but I was like, if I am going to go, there's one program that I want to do, and that's called ethnomusicology. And that's the study of world music and culture. And I was like, if I go to college, I would like to see what the rest of the world does. Because I'd had so much of the Western perspective, I wanted to get closer to the reasons why people start playing music in the first place. And so I did get in. I applied to one school, which was UCLA. And I told myself, if I don't get into UCLA, I'm going to move to England, because I'd wanted to live over there for so long, growing up, visiting there all the time and being half English and stuff. And I'd always wanted to live there. So I was like, okay, well, this is a good time to move there if I don't get into school. But I did get in. So I ended up staying in LA, going to UCLA, and just got to see what the rest of the world does and how they see music as a celebration of life. And it's not so much like the monetary thing that we have over here. So that was so eye-opening for me, and I got really into actually Indonesian music, Balinese music, while I was there, and I played Balinese gamelan for 4 years, traveled to Bali and performed in the gamelan there, and just got to see music and the arts in just a completely different way. And it just blew my mind. Yeah, it was amazing.
And general question. What were your plans after college?
So my plans after college were go on the road. And that's basically what happened.
You were just like, I want to tour. I want to go on tour.
I was just like, I want to go on tour. But for some reason, I felt like I had to finish school, which is weird because I was getting tour offers all throughout school. And for some reason, I just felt like I needed to incubate a little bit longer. So I did. And I basically, as soon as I finished college, I went on the road. But that was my plan all along. My only plan really was finishing school, like finish high school, then finish college. And then after that, I was like, well, I just want to go on the road. So see what happens. And then it happened. And I've basically been doing that ever since.
How were you getting tour offers in college?
Just getting phone calls from just people in LA. There's like different record companies that hire people to find musicians for bands. And there's just like different scouts, I guess. So you go on different auditions, people hear about you. There's like a database of phone numbers, like of drummers and database of bass players, different musicians. So I was on the bass player database in LA. So I would just get calls for stuff, calls to try out. If someone likes what you do, they offer you the gig or whatever. So just things like that mostly.
And was that like through the school, or did it also have something to do with you were playing in bands and playing?
It was mostly like just like playing in bands, word of mouth, the network that you're in. Also auditions that I would do, and you just become part of that database, and you become one of the people on the list that is called when a band's looking for a musician.
Oh, actually, I didn't even write this down, but we talked. This just comes up a lot in interviews, and it came up at the panel the other night. Was there any sense of, like, did being a female trained bass player, was that something that was like beneficial, or did it not really matter? It was just like, here's Eva Gardner, her name on this list of bass players.
Both, actually. There were times when I would try out for a gig and I wouldn't get the gig because I was a female, because usually it would be because there was a female lead front person and she didn't want the competition on stage, which is so lame. But that would happen sometimes. And then the flip side of it is there would be a band that wanted a female musician. So it's worked both ways. And I mean, it's pretty interesting how that is. But I have a lot of female friends who get pissed off about that. And they're like, what? I just want to be a drummer, not a female drummer. But there's a certain point, and I have felt that way also, where I just want to be like a bass player, not a female bass player. But at the end of the day, over time I've come to realize, like, but I am a female and I am a woman, so you just have to own it. Like, put on a skirt, show your legs, whatever. Like, just own what you are, because it is what you are, and it's a beautiful thing. And it doesn't have to be. You don't have to. I used to feel like I had to cover up and just be like, dress like a boy and like be one of the boys and to compete with the boys and play the boys game. And while I can do that, and I can talk shop all day and hang out with the boys, I grew up around boys. Like, I've only been around boys in bands for the most part. But on the flip side of that, there's something beautiful about being a woman, and growing into that and embracing that, I think, is really an important thing as well. So I'm not mad about that. And then someone asked me recently, what would you say if someone said you were good for a girl? And I feel like a few years ago, my answer would be different. My answer would be like, well, they should know that they shouldn't say that because that's not cool, and you should respect a musician as a musician, not because of what gender they are. And my answer now, I think, I told this person, I said, if someone came up to me and told me I was good for a girl, I would say thank you. Whatever, it's meant to be a compliment. Like, I'm not trying to start some shit. Like, I'm not gonna get on my high horse and give them a lecture about something. Like, I don't think it's coming from a bad place. Yeah, society has a lot of catching up to do as far as like gender equality, but if someone's paying me a compliment, I'm gonna say thank you. It's not meant to be like talking down to me or something like that. So, yeah.
I think it depends on who said it.
It depends on who said it. It depends on the context and how it is. But I think overall, it's like, yeah, there's gender inequality and all this stuff. But I feel like I've been pretty fortunate in that I've never really cared that much. Like, I don't give a shit. Like, I just want to play music. And I've been fortunate enough to be around people who don't give a shit either. And it's like, if you're good, great, they'll play with you. If you're not good, whether you're a woman or a man, then you're probably not going to get the gig. So there is an element of like, yes, you have to prove yourself. You have to work harder. You really, really have to like get to a level where you can compete with the guys. But at that point, if you can get the job done in a great way, chances are they'll want to work with you. So,
was Mars Volta the first band that you joined out of college, or first band that you like toured with? And
yeah, that was the first tour.
Yeah,
that was my first. I finally get to go on tour. That's with those guys.
How did you meet them, and join that band. What was your very first tour like after 22 years of waiting?
Yeah, so my first, actually, I know them through my friend Ike Owens, who is no longer with us, rest in peace, but I knew him through high school days, like playing shows around town, and I was actually in that arts high school with his little brother, who's a bass player, so just that connection there, and he was playing in a band with those guys called De Facto, and with Omar and Cedric, and when At the Drive-In had broken up, Ike called me and said that they wanted to start a new band. So he gave me a buzz and ended up meeting up with them. And we started just writing songs right away. And I remember being out at their place in Long Beach and sitting on the living room floor and trying to come up with band names. And it was just like a really exciting, like starting this new band and just writing this really awesome creative music. And that's what I was telling you about, coming out of college and like learning all these rules and then just like throwing all that out the window. And it was just so much fun because it was just so creative and so freeing, and it was a beautiful experience. And then it was like finally get to go on the road. And that for me, I was like, this is it. I've made it. And I'm having so much fun, and like I'm having so much fun in creating this music, and I'm with these wonderful people, and it was a great time.
Was that also your first experience, like in a working band that was kind of signed to a label, or being involved in like the music industry, I guess, in that way?
Yeah, so the bands I'd played in prior was just more local bands, and we were just doing everything on our own. This was definitely the first experience I had where these guys had been on the road before. They have made records, like they know that side of things. So I was actually in studios with them recording. We recorded demos, we recorded an EP, booking a tour, rehearsing, just everything that goes into working towards a tour and making it more of like a, I don't want to say structured, but leading towards something that's like you're organizing an event, like a tour, shows, and it's like a traveling circus, but there's a lot of things involved. There's gas, there's transportation, there's flights, there's hotels, there's booking bands, there's it's all the things that's involved with doing a tour. So it was the first time that I had been in a situation where all those elements came into play, and it felt like I felt like this is it. This is like I enjoyed the feeling of working towards a goal. And since I wasn't in school anymore, I actually met them right as I was finishing school. So by the time I finished school, I was like, oh God, this is great, because like now I can just focus on what I really want to focus on, which is music. So the timing was great.
And this is a very boring question, but I ask everybody. Was it difficult to make a living playing music? Did you have to supplement your income from like being in that band by doing other things or other work, other jobs?
Well, it goes back and forth, and the entertainment industry in general, like there's the feast or famine aspect of it, right? And I've been lucky because I also have the family business, which is the Cat Fiddle, the family pub. So from the age of 16, I've been working there. Like my parents put my sisters and I to work as soon as we could, like legally. It's, I guess that's why you have kids, right? To work on the family farm or whatever. So I always worked there. So when I'm not on the road, I'm there helping out to this day. I mean, I'm still there helping out, and I'm always lucky that I've had that as well to take part and help out with that or whatever. But yeah, it can be difficult. I know it's especially now. It's the studio world isn't what it was. Like even touring world isn't what it was. As far as like, there's just not the money that. It's always been difficult, but even especially now where the industry's at, there isn't the money that there used to be. Like the expense account doesn't exist anymore. You know, the A&R, artist development deals, like those things don't happen so much anymore. So it's a hairy time.
And I never want to like skip anything, so if I'm missing something that is very important, just I can go back. But how long were you with the Mars Volta And I read that you left when your father became ill. You ended up having to leave the band.
Yeah, he actually passed away 3 days into the first tour with them, which was pretty gnarly. But it was a weird it was a weird thing because I look back now and I feel like he'd kind of passed on the torch, you know, like he was on his way out right before we left, and I was like, well, Dad, I think I'm just gonna stay here and be here. And he's like, why the hell are you gonna stay here? You're just gonna cry. So get out there and just play. Go do what I taught you to do, basically. So I did, and he passed away 3 days later. So it was one of those times that was like I was doing what I wanted to be doing, but the reason why I was doing it was like, yeah, so it was kind of crazy. But yeah, but I played with them for a little while longer, and you know, it's just one of those things that just the timing was a little strange.
Yeah.
But.
And what did you do after Mars Volta? Or what were your kind of like plans for yourself? Were you just planning on playing with different bands? Did you ever want to, you know, like join a band that you would be with for a while, or?
Honestly, I never really had any plans, and I feel like I still don't ever have any plans. Like I never know what's around the corner, and that's kind of the beauty of it, and also the freaky thing about it, because it's an exciting thing, but you're also like, what's happening? Like there's nothing, you know, like if there's nothing planned or happening, it's people can get kind of freaked out by that, the not knowing, I guess, but which is like just the entertainment industry anyway, I think, for a lot of folks. But I just kind of have been going with the flow, and I've been very fortunate in that I've pretty much been on the road and working since I started touring. So after that, I picked up another tour, and I went over to the UK and did a couple shows opening up for the Rolling Stones, which was like amazing. That was my first arena experience. And then after that, I picked up the Veruca Salt tour, and I played with them. I went to my first time in Australia. It was like 04, 05. And just after that, I mean, and in between all those things, I also played in bands at home, and I was playing with friends and continued to do the creative projects and putting out music that's like original music, putting out original music. So I'm always doing that as well, and I'm just always filling in the blanks. If I'm home, or if I have some time to work on other stuff, I'll book studio stuff. I play on like soundtrack things. I'll just kind of whatever comes along, really. So all kinds of stuff.
You said you write your own music. You write songs as well.
Mm-hmm. I do.
Have you always done that?
I've always done that, like since I was a teenager. Like sitting on my bedroom floor, like playing guitar and writing songs. And that was like from my first all-girl band experience at the all-girl Catholic school. I've been doing it since then. But I've been mostly doing that in a band setting, and with my own music, I haven't really let the world hear it yet.
I was gonna say, have you ever played live or performed any of it?
Well, I mean, with band stuff, yes, yeah. But with my own thing, very new. I'm just coming around to saying like, you know what, screw it, whatever. I don't even care. I just need to I'm gonna put it out because I need to put it out. So that side of things, Eva Gardner, the songwriter, as opposed to Eva Gardner, the bass player. I'm working on my goal. I actually have a goal now, a new goal. My new goal is to put something out this year.
Oh.
Yeah.
You heard it here first.
You heard it.
No, I'm kidding.
Yeah. No, it's exciting. It's an exciting feeling, because I feel like through all these years I've been known as a bassist and been part of a band, like a band member, and part of a band as like a player and a writer within a band context, which is like a collaborative effort. And that's easier because it's like a buffer, right? It's like you're bouncing ideas off people, and it's a collaborative effort. And when it's just you, it's like you're vulnerable. And that's always, it's like kind of going back to me sitting in front of a piano and my piano recital. Like, that's a very vulnerable feeling for me, and I just like freaked out and I couldn't do it. And I've had that feeling inside for so long when it comes to my own music. And I'm finally at the point now where I'm like, you know what? Like, I don't even really care like there's a beauty in that vulnerability now, and I'm not as afraid to expose that. So it's exciting. It's it's very therapeutic. It's very cathartic for me. So I'm excited about it. I'm on the forward motion with that.
I'm excited.
Thank you. Yeah, me too.
And so you mentioned Veruca Salt, Mars. You played in Mars Volta, but you've played in a lot of different bands. So like all male bands, female fronted bands, bands with mixed kind of genders. Are there any differences when you're playing with a bunch of guys, or if you're playing with a band that's fronted with a woman? Is it something that does, I don't know, any differences or not really?
Not really so much, because it just depends on the people. And I love playing in a band with all guys. Like I love being around guys. I grew up with guys. It's a happy place for me. But at the same time, there's also a cool thing about playing in a mixed band or in a band with women, because the dynamic, it's a really fun dynamic as well, because it's like when I was playing in in a band called Little Sandwich with a couple gal pals for a while, and I hadn't played in an all-girl band for a while. And it got to be when we would be in writing sessions and rehearsals, we would just talk about boys the whole time, or stuff like that. And I'm like, oh, this is really fun. This is a really fun bonding experience, and it just becomes a really silly powwow at the same time. So there's beauty in that as well, that I kind of forgot that can happen with your girlfriends. And so it's just an extension of those relationships. And I think any dynamic of a band, whether it's men or women, just depends on the people and the personalities involved. So I think I'd love any and all of it. It's all fun. It's all fun for me.
This is the question that I have to deliberately add in because I never think about it. But you're sponsored by Fender and Ampeg, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And because you're trained, I feel like I have to ask, are you a gearhead? Do you use different basses for different bands? How involved are you in those choices when you're working in different projects?
I would definitely say I do like gear. I can have a conversation about gear all day. I know it's totally nerdy, but I do enjoy that. But I also don't think that's the be all end all of, you have to know how you can have the best gear, the most incredible amp, but it's if you kind of don't know what you're doing, it doesn't really matter. You know what I mean? As far as I'm just saying the gear's not going to make you sound great. So it's fun to talk about that stuff, but I think that if someone who's never played a guitar in their life and they have the most incredible Marshall stack, or if they don't care, or they're not really excited about music but they have cool stuff, that's not really going to make that much of a difference. But that being said, yeah, gear does, depending on the gig. I have the same bass that I use for everything, which is a Fender Precision for the most part, and that will be my starting place. And it's pretty basic. I have more of an old school, kind of vibe as far as the gear that I like. As far as Ampeg, I like the old tube amps, the really warm sound, and then Fender Precision, which was the first electric bass that was ever made. So I kind of second generation, old school Fender Ampeg. That's kind of what I do for the most part. Does that answer the question?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, it did.
Okay.
Okay, I think I want to ask the...
Oh, there's a flip side to that too, which is interesting, because I feel like at the panel the other night when they were talking about their gear and how they're not gearheads, and how she's got was it Julie that was saying she's got the
Julie's had the same PV
yeah,
PV amp,
which is so awesome. And I think that's the flip side, right? That amp can sound freaking fantastic. So it's not all about the name or the brand or the gear. If you've got the oomph and the pizzazz and there's something there, you can have a really fun player make some crap sound great. That's the flip side. So it's not, I love talking about gear, but it's not always about the gear.
Yeah. No, and I think that both sides are valuable too. That's the thing. Like, I know nothing about it, but it's not because I don't care. I wish that I did.
Hey, and there's a beauty in not caring also, because it's like you're just using that as a vehicle, right? You're just using that as a tool. And there's some like really crappy low-end guitars that like came out in the 60s, and people still use them and they sound great. Like there's something about them. They've got like a magical quality about them. And when they started out as being $150 in like 1966 from Sears, now they're like super sought after for this very interesting, valuable tone, you know? Yeah, it's cool.
Yeah, I told you, I think I said it in rehearsal, I've played the same guitar since 1997.
Yeah, that's
like,
awesome.
I'll get other ones, but it's just comfortable.
Yeah.
Okay, so you play with Pink now, which, you know, for those people who have never heard of Pink, she's a pretty big star, like most people know. But I just think it's so interesting that you've done like the indie band touring thing. You know, you will just play with Alice Bag at a little club in Los Angeles, and then you also play with Pink. You've played with Cher, and you do these huge. I don't even know how many people, like what the largest number of people you've ever played in front of is, but huge shows. I'm sure that there are many pros and cons and maybe some similarities and differences, but if you could just talk about like how those experiences differ, or what's great about them, or great about one and maybe not so great about another.
I think they're all fantastic, and I'm so grateful that I get to experience all of those things. And there's also something really special about, you know, just coming off of a tour this summer and playing to, you know, whatever, like huge festival, 100,000 people or something like that, and then coming home and playing at a local gig in my hometown. Like, to me, I feel like, but that's my roots, you know, and I felt like the other night was really special for me because I felt like I was in high school again. Like, some of those people that were on that stage, I went to go see in high school, like played in their bands when I was in high school, and it's all part of the same thing. And there's something so like visceral in the connection of being in a club and having an experience like that, and like talking to people before the show, after the show, and just that community is so important to me. And I love having that as well. And you know, when you play like at that other level where you're doing the huge shows, as far as the connection to the audience and stuff like that, you don't have that so much because it's just so vast and people are so far away. We're even so far away on stage, and while being like a ridiculously incredible experience as well, it's just totally different. So having both of those things are fantastic, and there's pros to each of them. I wouldn't say there's any cons. I would say there's just pros to both.
Yeah, I would think just playing in an indie band, like a con would be just being poor all the time. I don't know. Always like, oh, it must be nice to go on tour and like make some money or something. Just a common theme in every interview that I've ever done, even with people that, to me, like, you know, Kristen Hirsch, someone growing up who I thought, you know, she's like this icon, but it's, you know, she's like, it's so hard to make a living playing music.
Yeah.
And it's just crazy that that's this common thread, even with people like her.
Totally. Well, that's why I felt like sometimes it's helpful to just be like, I know a lot of people in high school and into college, a lot of the bands that were coming up out of LA, we grew up playing local shows, and then one of the bands would get interest from a record label or something like that, and everyone's giving them shit for it, saying like they're selling out and what's up with that. I'm like, dude, they have an opportunity to make money. Like, they have an opportunity to make a living doing what they love to do and playing music. Like, don't be an asshole about it. Don't give them shit for it. Like, congratulations, congratulate them because they have an opportunity. And this whole like sellout idea, I think, is like That's not cool, because this is what, like if you want to make a living doing what you love to do, why not?
Yeah,
it's okay.
Especially it's even harder to do that now.
Yeah. It just is really, really bummed me out when people would like talk about these bands that are like selling out. Like, dude, what? Really? If you got approached by a label, would you say no? You have opportunity to like play these great shows and get your song on the radio station. Would you say no and be like, no, I don't want to sell out? Like, I don't think so. So it's probably them just being like jealous or envious or something like that. But I mean, by all means, it's a great thing.
Okay, so and earlier I brought up the Hired Gun documentary.
Mm-hmm.
We were on the phone the other day. I was like, are you a session musician? I don't know if that's a mean, and you said it's fine. So, I'm assuming that they do, but do band dynamics differ when you come in as a session player or as a hired gun, rather than maybe like a founding member of a band? Or
I think it depends on the scenario. If you're working with an artist like, say, Gwen Steffani or something like that, as when she's doing her solo thing, you're all coming in as a hired gun. You're all coming in like as an employee for the artist. Like, you're not here as like, it's not No Doubt. You're not a band member. You're coming here to support her as a solo artist. So knowing that, the band dynamic is, yes, we are all here to do a job and to learn the songs and to do what it takes to support the artists. So there's an understanding there that we're all hired guns. If you're playing in a situation where you're around with some friends and like, hey, let's start a band, let's play some music together, then you're all coming together with a different pretense. You're coming together with, this is going to be a creative project, possibly a collaborative effort where you're all involved with the creative process. There's also a situation where someone will say, hey, I've got some songs that I'm working on, and I really need a band in the studio to record. I need a drummer, a bass player, whatever, to help me hash out my song. So in that situation, you're playing someone's songs, you're learning their songs, you ask them what they need, what they want. It just totally depends. And it depends on the pretenses. It depends on how it's being set up from the first hand. When a lot of times I can be a little bit, that's the problem in the whole music industry too. A lot of times there's like, you hear about like all the behind the musics about the band fighting all the time because they're all talking about songwriting, and the drummer and the bass player never get credit for parts that they came up with, and it's always like the singer and the guitar player that get all the credit. Like, that's a whole other band dynamic situation that can get a little weird, but it just depends.
I have one funny question. I'm just going to say it.
Okay.
I wrote this down. How did you manage not to pass out or die when you played with Cher? I'm like, because now we've like met each other a couple times, so I felt like it's okay. But we did talk about, I can't remember if it was on the phone or during or before we went into rehearsal or something, but like playing with you and being able to play in the same room with you, Patty. I've played with Alice a couple times, but it never gets old, ever. Mm-hmm. I was like, this is just so crazy. I know that you're also all just people, so it's like normal in a way, but it's still, it's insane for me and like an honor.
Thank you.
But like playing with someone like Cher, how do you stay cool?
well, I mean, like you said, you realize that they're just people, right? And a lot of the people that I play with or some of the people that I work with in the Pink Band also work with Cher as well. So there's already the same camp and that same community. So I'd been hearing about stories like of them touring with her, and like our drummer started playing with her like ages ago, I think in the late 90s. And so I'm just around this community of people that have just been part of that camp, and as well as a lot of other incredible artists. And you're just there. You're there to do to support them and to be part of that team. And when that opportunity came up for me, I mean, I was like insanely excited. Like, I mean, it was amazing, but it's also one of those points where, okay, this is my gig. Like, I don't want to say the word job, because I've never felt like it was a job, which I'm grateful for, because I feel like as soon as I start calling it a job, things shift in people's minds. And it doesn't feel like a job, but this is my gig. This is what I do. So this is my time to step up to the plate and do what I need to do to support the artist. And it was just an incredible opportunity to do that. And so I was able to, I mean, learning like, yeah, like I Got You, Babe, and then like Turn Back Time. And I'm like, there are still moments, I have to say, there are moments when I'm like sitting there playing and like singing Turn Back Time, backing her up, like singing these lyrics. And I watched this video on MTV when I was a kid, you know? I mean, like sometimes I do have to step back and it's pretty mind blowing. But also being in it, you have to play that part, right? And you've got to just roll with the big guns and step up to the plate and make it happen.
I'm glad I asked that.
Yeah.
How did you not pass out?
How did I not pass out? Lots of breathing.
And how do you think this came up the other night too, but there were so many people, I don't know if it got answered. But how do you feel that your experience as a bass player, not necessarily a front person, differs from women who front bands? Or how do you think you will be remembered historically in rock history as opposed to a front person? Or is that even important to you at all?
Only time will tell how I'm remembered in history, I guess. But I think, again, it just depends on the band. It depends on the situation. Like if you look at a band, if you look at the bass player in the Beatles, like Paul McCartney, like he's also a solo artist as well. But or look at like Led Zeppelin, like John Paul Jones. He's remembered as a band member. He's remembered as part of this unit. But then if you look at like Lee Sklar or something, he's known as a session musician, and he's very well known, but he's known for playing with all kinds of different people. So it just depends, I think, on the player. It depends on the bands they've played in. It depends on the artists they've played in. It just depends on their catalog, how history remembers them. Obviously, a front person is going to be remembered as being a front person because that's the first person that people see. People are usually looking like in a band setting at the person with the microphone a lot of the time, if not all the time or most of the time. So, because those are like the words, those are the lyrics, those are the things that people sing along to, those are the melodies that people catch on to. So I think it just is going to depend on the situation. There's a lot of bands also that people only remember the front person and can't name the rest of the band members. So, who's to say, really?
Yeah, it probably depends on like the personality, I guess, of the front person, or who media is focusing on.
Yeah, depends on how they've been portrayed in the media. It depends on how well the songs did. It depends on how involved the rest of the band members are. It just depends, I think.
Do you think it's important that hired guns and session musicians, that those stories get included in kind of like the larger rock narrative, though?
I think it's extremely important, and I'm glad that the documentary Hired Gun exists, because these are stories that I'm glad are being told. It's like the 20 Feet from Stardom documentary. It's the same idea. It's like these people have been working sometimes for decades with the same people, with these artists that everybody knows and loves, like the Rolling Stones, but you don't ever hear the stories about the people that work directly with them, because they're not in the spotlight. The media is not focused on them, but they're just as important as an important part of the puzzle as part of like the support system, as part of the band, as part of like the touring entourage. They become part of the family over the years, and those stories are very important because they help create these bands. They help create the music a lot of the time. They help create the aesthetic, the whole thing that surrounds it. So I think those stories are very important.
Okay, Eva, I'm going to ask you this gendered question because I feel like you won't yell at me.
Okay.
You don't have to answer it, but I try to bring it up if I think things are going okay.
Sure.
Sometimes I'm like, I'm not going to ask this person. But so you talked a lot about your schedule, about having to, you can come back from tour and then you sort of can't plan ahead very much, but you seem to always be working or have a gig.
Mm-hmm.
How has being a working, touring musician, I don't know, affected your personal life, I guess? I feel like there are kind of choices that you have to make
Mm-hmm.
when that maybe affect women differently than they affect men.
Affect men, yeah, absolutely.
It is a gendered question, but
absolutely,
I think it's important.
Yeah, I mean, I find that it is an issue. It can be an issue a lot of the time, and for biological reasons and more. It's a lot of times it is easier for men to be on the road for long periods of time. For women, it's a little bit more difficult, I think, especially when it comes to having a family, things like that. Sometimes it's possible. It's entirely possible, but sometimes it can propose a little bit more of a challenge. As far as the touring thing in general, it's not for everybody, and it can be very difficult for someone to have a family life or a partner, and it takes a certain person to be able to be in a relationship with someone who tours for a living or is on the road for a living, and on both sides. So I can propose challenge for sure. I haven't found that person yet for whatever reason, but it is what it is, and I'm open to it for sure. But I enjoy my life, and I enjoy what I'm doing, and I enjoy the freedom of it. And if those other things come along, I'm definitely open to it and crossing that bridge when I get to it. I say when.
That's very, that's very positive. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm always like, no, it's over.
Yeah, I mean, it's like you never know. The universe is always presenting really incredible opportunities, and if you're just open to these things and just keep an open mind and an open heart with all of it, I think beautiful things can happen.
You're very positive.
Thank you.
I'm gonna call you once a week.
Okay.
And just have you
Anytime.
Just, say things like
Call
that.
me anytime.
Great. Okay. That's not my baseline. I'm still optimistic person, but okay, so I just have a few left. These are questions I ask everyone at the end of every interview. What are your thoughts on the visibility of women in rock history in general? Is there a gender discrepancy? Is gender not an issue at all? Has it changed for the better or worse since you started?
Okay. So let's start with the first part of that question. Will you repeat the first couple things?
What are your thoughts on the visibility of women in rock history in general?
Okay. So it seems like there has not been much visibility of women in rock history in general. And from what I hear and from stories that I've heard from other women who've blazed the trail, basically, it was not a very friendly place for women to be in music. I mean, very recently, it was not appropriate. I mean, this is like, I think, within the last 100 years, it wasn't appropriate for, I mean, and this is just an extension of, I think, women in society anyway. In our society, it was not appropriate for women to handle money. It was not an exchange of money. It was like, it's just not ladylike kind of a thing. So I think it's all a lot of the same kind of ideal, and a woman playing an instrument and being out there and playing shows, and it's like a late night thing, and you're around men. I mean, if for whatever reason, it just wasn't like a big thing. And also, I think there's some serious women that can play, and you don't hear their stories. You hear about Louis Armstrong, but you don't hear about his wife, Lil Hardin Armstrong, who was like a total badass, and they played in a band together. Exactly. You hear about Lester Young, who's like an incredible sax player, but you don't hear about like the women in his family that were also musicians that like taught him how to play and were the reason why he played. Like, you don't hear those stories. And I'm wondering if it's because the historians are men, like men are writing these stories. It could be a number of factors, but the visibility definitely isn't there, but I know they existed. I know they were there. And I know that even going into the classical realm, there's a lot of composers that their husbands were very, very famous composers. I think Schumann is one of them. Clara Schumann's the wife. And she was also a fantastic composer. And I think to the point where her husband was a little competitive with her because she was such a badass. But you don't hear her story. They're there, but you don't hear about it. And it could be a number of reasons why. But and I think could be an extension of just kind of where we're at in society and in the workforce anywhere, I think. But we're out there. I mean, I've seen gender being an issue at times where I'll walk in, I remember loading into to clubs in high school or whatever, and I'm loading in my gear, and the sound guy's like, "Oh, you're such a good girlfriend. You're carrying your boyfriend's gear in for him." Like, things like that. Like, there's an assumption that you're schlepping your boyfriend's shit, that you're not actually a musician. There's these assumptions that are there. Again, maybe it should just be ignorance, but I've experienced it from teachers in school that have commented on my legs, before they will my bass playing. So, I've experienced it, but it's not something I choose to dwell on because I'm here for a different reason. I want to play music, and I'm going to surround myself with peers that are here for the same reasons.
Okay, I'll take care of the history part then. For you.
Yeah, exactly.
Has it changed for better or worse?
Has it changed for better or worse? I think that there's definitely, probably with the internet and media and social media, there's definitely a female presence that wasn't there even when I started playing, because now people are more in control of like what they're putting out there, right? There's a lot of women who play music that have their own YouTube channel and they're putting stuff out there. It's not up to the historians. It's not up to the book writers or the TV show makers anymore about what's out there. It's like people can put out their own content.
How do you feel about the category women of rock? Helpful or hurtful? Is it necessary or unnecessary? Would it be more productive to omit gendered categories altogether at this point in time?
I think that, the gendered category, if you don't have a gendered category, what are you going to say? People in rock? There's a lot of people in rock, a lot of men in rock, mostly men, some women, but what we're talking about, a lot of the women's stories you don't hear about, even though they're present and they're there and they've been here all along, you don't hear about them. So I think, at least for now, having a gendered category is helpful just to get the word out there. I don't think it's hurtful necessarily, and I think having a general term, like using the word rock in general, is encompasses a lot of different styles.
What are you most proud of personally and or professionally?
Gosh. I just feel proud that I've gotten to this point, and I feel like I have surpassed any dreams that I ever had. My dream was to tour the world, and I've done that, and I've done more than that. And the people I've met and the experiences I've had, and just beyond touring, like the bands I've been in, the studio projects I've been a part of, just having such a beautiful array of different things within the realm of music and in the arts. I'm very proud. Yeah.